Welcome to the Debt to Financial Freedom podcast. I'm your host, Victor Lagos, and the founder of Lagos Financial. I've been in the finance and lending industry for 16 years, and I've personally made financial mistakes and learned from them. I started this podcast to share stories and lessons on my own journey and to share insights that may help others on their journey. And I interview people that I've connected with that share the same values and mission to help others create financial freedom. My goal with this podcast is to share raw, honest, transparent, and helpful stories that you can relate to and inspires you to take control of your finances and only have debt that brings you closer to financial freedom. Everything on this podcast is general in nature and for education purposes only. None of your personal objectives, financial situation, or needs has been taken into consideration. I highly recommend you seek personal, financial, legal, taxation, and credit advice before you take any action on what has been heard on this podcast. Welcome to episode 3 of the Debt to Financial Freedom podcast. I'm your host, Victor Lagos. Today I've got a special guest, a friend of mine actually. We met a couple of years ago and we've had a lot of conversations, and I'm really glad to meet you face to face in person here. Dr. Dionne Payn. Welcome.
Thank you. It was good to pinch you this morning and make sure you were a real
human. I know,
human.
Right? It's always been like on camera. But I want to give a quick short intro, if that's all right. So Dr. Dionne Payn, she's a founder and CEO of High Impact Property Investments. For short, HIPPY. The company specializes in partnering investors seeking double-digit returns with projects that provide affordable and sustainable homes. Dionne is the author of the #1 best-selling book, Ethical Property Investing, and is a board advisor to a non-for-profit organization that helps women into affordable homes. How was that?
That was awesome.
Awesome. Well, can you share your story? Like what led you here to where you are now? And I really want to understand, like, what is your big mission and vision? I'm aware of it, but the audience don't know.
Okay, cool. All right. I think really then I have to start with my mum and my nan. So my nan moved, both sets of grandparents actually moved from Jamaica to the UK back in the 60s. And it was part of a big effort to repair Britain after the war. And as Jamaicans, I think they thought that it was the promised land. And then when they got there, the reality was it was cold, grey, miserable. And they faced a lot of discrimination. So, from that, my nan always had the belief, which she shared with us as kids, was that we had to work harder than everybody else to be able to get ahead. So I'm like, thanks, Nan. I'm now really driven.
It's a nice gift to give you. Yeah.
It is. Obviously there's times and places where you need to be driven. But the other great gift that I believe my Nan gave me was the gift of wanting to be in service and that just being a very natural part of my life. My Nan, my granddad, that side of the family were very religious, Pentecostal Christians.
Okay.
Had some interesting sides to it, but the two things that I really got from it were, #1, that being in service and whatever we had, being able to share that with other people to help them to ease their suffering. And the other thing was this sense of community. And I realised that when I did leave the church community when I was in my late teens, I'd always been seeking that community until I moved to the Byron Shire, which gave me that sense of community that I was looking for. But specifically, I left the UK in 2004, 2005, moved to Australia, did a PhD at Southern Cross University in chemistry, which is so different to what I'm doing now. But
that's where you get your doctor title from.
I got my doctor title from that, yeah. What that meant for me was that I had enough points to stay in Australia, but also being in the Byron Shire, I was like, well, I can't afford to buy a home here on one income. After I finished my PhD, I decided to have children with my husband. He was working. I wasn't working because I wanted to stay home and be home with the kids.
Yep.
And I just the one income. It was already unaffordable. Like, it's gone up a lot since then, but it was unaffordable then. So for me, property was a way of finding finding a creative way to basically understanding the game of property. So if I could understand how it worked, then I might be able to find a creative way to get into it. And so I started off, I did a mentoring course. My husband and I did that together. We found a joint venture partner. Our very first project was actually an affordable housing project, although I didn't realise it. There was a house and a studio that was attached. We detached the studio, renovated both properties, subdivided and sold them separately. And that studio, it was a one-bedroom studio on quite a large block of land, and we sold that for under $300,000. So in that sense, that was my first affordable housing project.
Awesome. And that gave you the capital to really start the next one, right?
Well, yeah, it gave the capital, but it also gave confidence in, we didn't start with money. We had some money, which was what we used for mentoring, but we didn't have enough for a deposit. But what that meant was, we can work with other people to achieve a goal. The joint venture partner that we had was great. He had he had money but no time, and we had lots of time but no money. So it was a good partnership, and so it was a really good illustration to me of how we could collectively pool the resources that we had to get an outcome that worked for us both. And from then I did more projects, some smaller projects. I saw, after about doing 3 or 4 of those, I saw a piece of vacant land which had development approval for 14 one-bedroom townhouses in Ocean Shores. And I was a bit gung-ho, to be honest with you, in terms of I looked at it and I was like, well, I know how to do feasibilities. I know how to bring people together to make this work. But it was quite a big jump from what I'd done before to doing that. But what actually happened was that I found joint venture partners. We built the 14 townhouses. 3 of them were affordable rental housing, which meant that they were managed by a community housing provider who had them for a period of 10 years, and the tenants would pay 80% of the market rent. And then the rest of them, because they were so small, I mean, they were 1 bedroom, they were 60 square metres, but that was an entry price for that location. So I actually had friends that were able to buy into that development who may not have been able to buy anything in the area had that not been there. So the benefit that I saw from that was that, number one, I could meet all my service needs, doing something for the community. But also I got well rewarded for it. We walked away with a 25% per annum return on investment.
Wow.
And look, it was a big thing. It was a big risk. We did work to de-risk it as much as possible, but things went wrong. The builder went broke and things like that. So, but even despite all of that, we had something that had this massive community benefit. And so since then, I just thought, I can't do property any other way. If there's not a bigger benefit to just making money, it's not going to work for me.
That's why, you and I connected. And when I heard you the first time talking about this, I wanted to reach out to you because this space, and a lot of people know this, that in property development, there's a lot of people that are doing it for the money. They're doing it for themselves. They're doing it for obviously future projects, but they're not thinking about the larger community and what impact is it making. So yeah, I love that. And your big mission, I mean, I don't want to spoil it, but it's a big one.
It's pretty hairy.
Yeah.
I'll explain where that came from. So after that particular project, like I said, I had bitten off quite a lot and burnt myself out. So it took me a little bit of time to just, sort of recoup and bring myself together. And as part of that recuperation process, I decided to do personal development. And so for the couple of years after that, I did a number of personal development courses. And there was one where we had a task to do. There was a group of us, I think 5 of us. We had a task to do. Everybody in the course was set the task. We were the ones that achieved that task. And it was really beautiful because what I recognised from that was the power of collaboration. Up until then, I'd been doing things alone. But with this group of women, we were able to collaborate. And what that meant was in the times that they were down, I was there to rally around and cheer them up. And in the times that I was down, they rallied around and cheered me up as well.
Awesome.
So having that sort of mutual support network was fantastic. And from that, I Yeah, just having that power of collaboration was really important. And for me, that's just the way that I wanted to move forwards and do all of my projects. So I ended up meeting a developer who had a lot of experience, and I think that was the person that you met or that you heard on the podcast initially. And we ended up working together, collaborating together, and I just saw that there was such a bigger play at hand. And as part of this sort of moving from this personal development course where I met these wonderful group of women to meeting the developer, I figured out that my role with the developer was going to be raising capital. His role was going to be doing the developments. But when I was speaking to my friend Joanna, she said, well, there's something that's not, there's something that you're not speaking. What is it? And I was like, well, it just irks me to see that there's so many companies that are doing things that are destructive for the environment and destructive for people. And there's so much money that gets thrown into that arena because it does make money. What if I was to divert some of that money? Like, what if I was to raise $1 billion for ethical property projects? And it was one of those moments where the words flew out of my mouth. I didn't think about it. And I was like, oh, can I retract that? But, I spoke it into existence. And, spoken to my friend Joanna. I spoke it to my developer colleague at the time. I was like, well, we can do this. And over time, what I've found is that the more I speak it, I've got a book, I've put it in the book, I've got it on my website, I've got it in my social media posts. The more I speak it, the more it's actually coming to fruition.
Yeah, wow. So when is the time frame to hit the $1 billion mark?
December 2026.
December 2026. So you've got just under 4 years.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I think it's doable.
Well, it's totally doable. One of the things that I'm working on at the moment is putting together a portfolio of developers and their particular projects in the specialist disability accommodation, in the sustainable housing space, and also in the affordable housing space. And with that coalition of projects, or curating those projects, that's $160 million worth of capital that's needed to make those projects happen. And they're all fantastic projects, and they're all going to have such a big impact in the spaces that they're in.
Yep.
And that's what we're going to do this year. So
awesome.
That's exciting.
It is. And I wanted to, so the audience who don't know what affordable housing is, could you explain what is affordable housing and why is it becoming a bigger problem in Australia?
Let's start with the problem. There's been two things that I see. One is that as Australians, and it's not just an Australian issue, but certainly here, we view property as a vehicle to creating wealth. Fantastic. What that means, though, is that people that aren't in on that secret to creating wealth through property then get left behind because everything's done at their expense. So as an example, and I'm not bagging Airbnb per se. I stayed in an Airbnb property last week. It was fantastic. But when you've got people that accumulate properties and then you've got supply and demand issues, one of the things that happened during the pandemic was because we realised that we could work from anywhere, it meant that people in the capital cities that were earning capital city money were able to go to the regions and then purchase properties for that were great value for them. But then it just meant that prices went up because the demand went up and the supply didn't. Yeah. So that has meant that a lot of people, either in renting or in purchasing, haven't been able to purchase. So we're talking about people that may have lived in that community for a long time, and they are now outpriced. So that's one aspect. And then you've got the Airbnb aspect where landlords realise, we can make a lot of money through renting our properties through Airbnb, but then that's at the expense of the community that live homes. And so then you've got this challenge because the people who are making the coffees, who are doing the childcare, who are working in the retail shops, they can't live in the locations in which they work. So even though you get a lot of tourism and a lot of tourism dollars, there's actually nobody to really service that tourism industry. So it's just out of balance at the moment, and I think that we can bring that into balance. And I know that there's definitely moves to doing that. I think that the government is starting to recognise the scale of the problem, and they're doing some things about that. And they're definitely putting more money into creating affordable housing, and working with industry and super funds to make that flow of capital more available. But essentially, what I see as the problem is if you don't have a safe, secure and affordable home, and you're spending more than 30% of your income on rent, and that's the kind of benchmark for affordable housing, then you're in housing stress, then you're in survival mode, then you can't think creatively. And the implication of that on the society in which we live, we then end up with a lot of stressed people that are not at their best, with children who are in an environment where parents are squabbling about money, where there's separation, where there's divorce, where there's mental health issues. This is not healthy for us as a society. So this is the reason that we need to change it.
Yeah, that's powerful. And it's one of the reasons why I started this podcast, because, it's called Debt to Financial Freedom. And there's many people that are very, very low on that spectrum. They've got debt. They can't even afford their rent. So financial freedom is a pipe dream for them. They don't even know what it is. They're like you said, they're in survival. So what you're doing is obviously really powerful, because you're not thinking about how much can I earn by accumulating more property. It's how many people can I serve? How many tenants that really need homes that can't afford to live in these areas can I provide for? And you're collaborating with a larger network that shares that vision, that shares that mission, and you can make a larger impact. And you're not waiting for government, right? Even the government are helping, but this just allows you to reach more and do more.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's worth making the distinction between different income levels. So you've got people that are on very low incomes, and the housing requirements for them are typically social housing. And that's an area where government should really be stepping up into. Then you've got affordable housing, which is for people that, like your essential workers, for example, like your childcare workers, your ambulance drivers, your nurses, your police, that sort of thing. And so these are people that have got really good jobs and a decent income and stable, but they're still being priced out of the market. So they're not a developer, they're actually a fund manager. They're putting together a shared equity scheme to help people. So essentially a police person could be working in Sydney. Property prices in Sydney start off at, 1 million, 1.2 million, something like that. So this fund is saying, well, look, we will chip in the 20% deposit for you. You get your 80% loan, and then we'll share in the capital growth that happens over a period of time. And so it's taking that. It's not a win-lose anymore. It's a win-win. It's like we win alongside you. And then what that means is that police person can live in the area that they work in. They can be more present. They're not as stressed. There's so many challenges that happen for police. Maybe sorting out the affordable housing crisis for police and for nurses and what have you will lead to better outcomes in each of those industries and each of those services.
I totally agree. So that's really the solution that you're working on. How can people and investors get involved?
Capital.
Capital.
There's always a need for capital. And look, as an example, somebody that was looking to purchase a home to rent out, and of course that there is nothing wrong with renting out property. There's nothing wrong with purchasing an investment property. I think the way that we do it now just has to be different. The way that we do it, rather than squeezing every last piece of juice out of somebody, just has to be, okay, well, how can we do this in a way where everybody wins? So as an example, there are property investments that you can get where, as an investor, you can be earning a 10% return per annum on your investment. And that is that then means that that property is cash flow positive. It means that the tenants are achieving an affordable rent, and that's a win-win. Now that type of property investing, there's lots of them. One example of them is co-living. So that's basically where you create a space for create a house where multiple people can live in that house. And in each environment, in each council, the rules are going to be slightly different. But essentially, the amount of money that you can get, or the amount of rent that you can get because you're getting it from 4 or 5 individual people, means that your expenses are covered and there's positive cash flow there. But each of those people are paying an affordable rent. And I remember the very first project that I introduced to you, Victor, that was the case, where the house was being built for 4 older women. Each of them were paying $250 a week. It wasn't actually built in the end, but the idea was each of them would pay $250 a week, which meant that the cash flow for the investor that owned that property was positive. So essentially they ended up with more money in their pocket than if they didn't. And in that way, they were able to support 4 people in that home, and the impact was greater.
And yeah, I do remember because what attracted me was, you talked about a triple bottom line approach. So obviously the financial one, that's why investors invest. They want to get a financial benefit. There's the environmental, and that's when you talked about sustainable project. We haven't really spoken too much about that, but obviously everyone's aware about, using materials that are not going to leave too much of a carbon footprint, and, solar power and whatnot.
Can I just share?
Yeah.
I met a developer the other day, so we're talking, and I'm hoping that they're going to be one of my portfolio of companies. Essentially, the homes that they build produce 2 times as much energy as they consume. So essentially, they're powering themselves, they're powering one home. They could also power their neighbour as well.
Wow, that's powerful, actually. Is that something that's already in operation?
Yeah, well tested, already in operation.
All around Australia?
This particular developer is in Victoria.
Okay.
And so we're in talks as to how we can scale that with them.
Yeah, there's no real end that you can put on this. There's so much potential. You can, provide the materials for other builders, and, investors or home buyers can start to be more conscious about who they work with, what builders and what materials they use. And the other part was the social impact, right? And that's what you talked about earlier about community. Can you expand on that a little bit about how it does help a community and how communities can work together in these types of projects?
Okay, so I think of the initial project that I spoke about, the 14 townhouse project, and what that meant for that particular community were that people that had lower incomes could actually be part of that community, which then means that that community is more diverse rather than homogenous. In that diversity of community, you've got people with different skills. So you've got artists and people that are there to, childcare workers, for example, or care workers for aged care, doctors that were living by themselves, or teachers. So then it just supports that diversity of the community, which I just believe is better. That's a very subjective statement, but it's like everything. Everybody's got a different skill set, and when you combine those different skill sets, then so much more can be achieved. And so I just believe that when you provide affordable housing for people, and they do feel safe in those communities because they're not having that stress of not being able to pay their rent, you just get better connections between people. And actually what I think is happening in the world today, a lot of the reasons for the issues that we have are that there's that disconnection of ourselves. So we're not connected with ourselves, we're not connected with other people, and we're not connected with the planet. Yeah. That's where I think a lot of our problems are stemming from. So once community, there's a really good saying, I hope I can remember it. something along the lines of community is immunity from dysfunction.
Even that sounds good. Immunity from dysfunction. It's true. We're social creatures, you know. When people were isolated through the pandemic, it really caused a lot of stress and
a lot of mental health issues.
Yeah.
I know of the number of suicides increased, and you know, communities were really fractured because of that. It became a, you know, sort of an us tribe and a them tribe, and it just wasn't a healthy space for us to be in. So that's kind of from the smaller level. The larger level, or the vision that I see, is in creating communities that incorporate reforestation, regenerative agriculture, work, home, and community right at the centre. So whether that's community gardens or community centres or food co-ops, that's what I'm working towards, because I believe that then does provide that reconnection to ourselves, each other, and the planet.
Yeah, it's powerful. I've recently joined a community garden, actually. Really enjoy it. Yeah, it's you know, you get to see Mother Nature again, and you get to contribute to something greater. It's organic garden as well. So got my wife and I, we've got a little plot of land there. So we're just gonna plant some veggies and some fruits, and it is a community. Everybody shares it with each other. So.
And the beautiful thing about that is that you plant a seed and you get to see how nature is so abundant. And then you get to share in that abundance with the people around you as well. And I think I'm kind of riffing here.
No.
I don't have a formalised thought about that. But when you have that sense of abundance in a community that has that sense of abundance, because you're all being able to share in that as well, I think that there's something really magical that happens there. And I just think that that's what we need to encourage, that not everybody is going to want to start a garden, but maybe it's inviting your neighbours in and sharing food with them.
Yeah.
And just having those conversations, that richness. They have proven that for elderly people that are in nursing homes, just having young people come in and, you know, sort of sit with them, play games with them, be with them, is really beneficial for those older people because they feel young, and for the younger people because they are able to be in service to something bigger than themselves. So I think it's a good thing.
That in itself, I think, needs to be unpacked a little bit. Being in service of others, it's something that's ingrained in all of us, but I think the way society has pulled people away from that, you know, inherent want and desire to do greater good. You know, it's like if an old person fell in the street, you would automatically go and help them.
100%.
There's no part of you that says, "Oh, should I? How will someone look at me?" Like there's nothing like that. But you know, the way business has kind of been since, I guess, the Industrial Revolution has really been about, you know, what do they call it? Dog eat dog world, or you know, survival of the fittest. But it's not. It's really about how can I contribute? How can I give more? Because the more you give, the more you receive.
Yeah.
Right? That's actually my slogan for my business, or my tagline: "Giving is receiving," which some people think it's strange for a financial services business to have giving is receiving, but that's what really changed for me when I started to think about that abundance that you talked about. It's an energy. It's like when I help someone, I'm not actually losing anything, even if they, you know, that idea that they're taking my time or they're taking my energy. Well, they will take it if you let them, by coming from that mindset of scarcity. But if you think, no, I'm actually sharing and I'm giving, you know, whether it's insights, a new connection just by introducing them to someone, even just listening to someone, like, and not listening and thinking about what you're saying next, but actually feeling what they're feeling, right? Feeling that emotion, and that in itself is giving. And then if you know that the more you give, the more you receive, then it is abundant. Same way when you're planting, right? Plants help out other plants, right?
Yeah.
Trees help us. We help them, right? It's like that. And you just got to tap into it. And I want more people to become aware of that and just practice it, because the more you practice it, the easier it gets and the more natural it is. And all you're doing is going back to how you are anyway, deep down, right? Yeah. Do you find yourself, operating from that every single day when you get up? Do you think, you know what, how can I give today? How can I contribute? Or do you have to remind yourself sometimes?
I have a practice that is when I get up and I sort of do my meditation practice. And I have to say, I didn't expect this conversation to go this way today.
That's how it's a natural conversation. We let it flow.
I was like, don't be too woo-woo, Dionne. Don't be too woo-woo. Okay, so I'm not some guru. I'm not some spiritual, sage or anything like that. I do have a practice. And as part of that practice, it's how can I give today and how can I receive today? Because it's both sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
And it's not natural to me to operate this way. It's something that I'm practicing. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So you're sort of training yourself to do that every single day, and because obviously things happen throughout the day, right? Something that sort of knocks you out. You're not feeling the best version of yourself. So it's good to have a daily practice to sort of center yourself and bring yourself back into that energy. Yeah.
And I shared with you off camera an experience that I had recently where I decided that I wasn't going to work with somebody. And it really was because they were coming from that scarcity place and unwilling to look at, well, how can we all win? It was very much I'm going to win, you're going to lose. And that framework just cannot work going forward. So I'm not just talking about that particular potential client. I'm just talking about life in general.
And it is a shift that we're going through at the moment.
Yeah.
People have thought that that's what was required. To be successful, someone else has to lose. You need to win, someone has to lose. Obviously, their focus isn't how can I make other people lose? They're just focused on themselves. How can I win?
Yeah.
But if you think, how can everybody win? Then you can say no to people. You can say no to opportunities. It doesn't matter how much money it's going to bring you, because it's not about that. Money comes and goes, right? It flows, right? It's they call it cash flow, not cash accumulate and not spend. Right? There's a reason for that, right? I did want to ask you, because the podcast is called Debt to Financial Freedom, and I have a meaning of what I believe financial freedom is, but I want to ask my guests what is the definition of financial freedom to you?
Good question. In the context of what we've spoken about, it is about abundance. And it's not necessarily the amount of money that you have. It's just that feeling of, I have enough.
Yeah.
And I'm being provided for.
Yeah, it's such a feeling.
Yeah. It is definitely a feeling. And so, from that space, you don't have to come from, well, how do I get? It's, like I was saying before, how can I give? How can I receive?
Yeah.
How do I stay open to all of that?
Yeah.
So, in modern world, our understanding of financial freedom is having a decent car, having a home, being able to go on holidays. I'm not saying, I'm not a nun. I love all of that, I love my little 2019 Toyota Corolla hybrid, and I love the fact that I get to spend time visiting family, visiting friends, going and seeing different places. I love the fact that, we live in a gorgeous place in the Northern Rivers, but there's a point where it's not, and I'm not saying that everything in my life is sorted either, but it's how do I operate from that space of not fear? Yeah. How do I operate from that space of there is enough and there are resources around me? And if I don't have those resources, I can find somebody to collaborate that does.
Yeah, I love that. You're really tackling that sort of emotion or that fear inside that I can't do it. And it's like, well, if you can't, then do you have the resources around you? And if you don't, then what can you do to find those resources, right? And it's always about collaboration. Because it's not about doing it on your own, right? It's about having good people around you.
Exactly.
And it is a journey to find good people. I mean, that's why you and I connected, because we had so much synergy there. And I think you actually mentioned the story I shared with you in your book, didn't you?
Yes. Oh, you found it.
Yeah, I did, which is nice. Yeah. I won't go into too much detail. I did share it on episode 1 about, my why around about my parents and what they went through. And I am bringing another guest on that can really share a bit more details around, people losing when it comes to property, because it is such an emotional buy. And there are people out there that really take advantage of people that are focused on that emotion. They want to provide for their family. They want to set themselves up for retirement. But then the people that are, selling to them are not thinking about them. They're thinking about themselves.
Yeah.
And
there's a level of financial literacy that we all need to have, and we don't get taught that in schools. And so then we have to take the responsibility to find that for ourselves. I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad a long time ago, and I was like, yeah, that's interesting. It wasn't until recently where I read it again, and I was like, how did I miss this? His whole thing is buying assets that generate cash flow.
Exactly.
My twist on that is buying assets that have impact and generate cash flow.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. Not just focus on the cash flow. Yeah. And that's why, for me, when I talk about financial freedom, it is about buying assets that create cash flow. And it's not 100% passive, but it is reasonably passive. And that just means that you don't have to trade your time and labor for the money. And like you said earlier, when it comes to, we have to survive, a lot of people are in that survival state. It's because we're in a society where we have to pay to live. Like, as soon as you're born, like, you don't feel it because you're a dependent child, but your parents are having to work and they have to provide, the shelter and the food. And if your survival, instincts are kicked in, you're not able to be creative. You're not thinking about how you can give. You're thinking, how can I live and survive the next day, right? So I like this definition, and I heard it recently. It's a simpler way of understanding financial freedom. I heard it from Tony Robbins, and he said it's about building a money machine that will let you do what you do without having to work. That's it. It's not like you're not going to work, but you don't have to work, right? Because I used to explain it where enough passive income to replace your living expenses so that you can, be your best self. It's still the same thing, but I think it just makes sense. Like, you don't have to sacrifice your lifestyle, but let you do what you do, but you don't have to work. If you don't have to, you can do what you do. You can have a big mission and vision to help the world, to help the community, and collaborate with others that think the same way. So
there's a great quote. I can't remember who it is. I think it might have been Jim Collins. But it's along the lines of, the more people that you help, the more money that you will make.
Yeah.
And it answers that.
You can have everything you want in life if you help other people get what they want.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, love it. That's so true. Well, I want to ask you, how can people find you?
Well, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So if they do a search for me, Dr. Dionne Payn, DIONNEPAYN. I do also have a website, which is hipi.global. I know that you're going to be placing links into the show notes, so I can provide some information for you there as well. And for anybody that is interested in ethical property investing, I'm very happy to share a copy of my book, and we can make that available through your show notes.
Awesome. That's very generous of you. I know you sent me a copy and it was signed, so thank you for that. No, so I'll put the notes in the show notes. I'll give the link, so anyone who wants to get a copy of Ethical Property Investing, you'll be able to order that with a specific link. Will it be a physical copy or a PDF?
It'll be a physical copy. As long as somebody's happy to pay for the postage, it can be a physical copy.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I love it.
There's something great about holding books.
I agree, right? Yeah. So old school, but it's powerful. And you know exactly where you left off as well. Right?
Exactly.
Little reminder, damn it, that bookmark. Gotta get back to it. Well, I want to say thank you so much for coming today. I really appreciate it. I know you came all the way from Byron region, so it's a bit of a distance to Sydney, but always lovely to see you. Looking forward to collaborating with you again in the future.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks again.
Thank you. And thank you for all of your belief in the work that I've been doing. And
Always.
you mentioned that we bonded because of that shared vision.
Yeah.
And I'm really happy to have you as part of that journey. So thank you.
Yep, me too. Really happy. And it's going to watch this space because, Dionne and I are going to work on another project, and I'll mention in a future show. Exciting times. I'll see you soon.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Victor.
Cheers. Well, if you've enjoyed that, please like us on our socials and stay tuned for the next episode.